are you actually sorry that they feel that way? It's more likely that you are angry they feel that way, or confused that they feel that way, or puzzled that they feel that way. It seems that the more appropriate response would be, I don't agree with you on that. Or you might try, you're telling me that you're hurt. I hear that. It appears that now we're both hurt.
So, narcissistic apologies, right? So much fun. Well, let's think about it. Let's break it down. When you get an apology from a narcissistic person, is it an apology or is it actually a defense? So you can drop this in the comments, your feelings about the narcissistic apologies you've received or even what they look like. There are few things more painful and invalidating to experience than an apology from a narcissistic person, right? Narcissistic people don't really apologize. They deflect, they rationalize, they blame shift. I am sorry you feel that way. An apology, true apology, contains contrition, accountability, and awareness of the harm to another person. I'm sorry for what I did, it hurt you, and I take responsibility for my action. Apologies are really about making amends in an honest way. It all seems so simple, right? That true apology is all but impossible for a narcissistic person. The thing that they often do, though, is they turn the apology into a bit of a defense. So let's take a look at some examples. It might be things like, okay, I'm sorry I yelled at you. Are you happy now? Because I yell because I'm never heard or appreciated. If you could just show me that you care, then I wouldn't be so on edge. So weigh in. Is that an apology? Or is that merely them defending themselves? Personally, I think it's a defense wrapped up in a gaslighted bow. That's the struggle, right? More often than not, narcissistic apologies basically feel like they're defending themselves. It's like they're providing an evidence base for the thing that they're actually supposed to apologize for. Their mouths form the words, I'm sorry, but it ends up being an entry into a big defensive mess. This comes up a lot in situations involving narcissistic infidelity. They'll say something like, okay, I get it. You're mad at me. I'm sorry. Ugh, I've been feeling ignored for a while since the kids were born, or since you got your new job, or since your parents moved into town. Fill in the blank on whatever the reason they gave you for cheating on you. And we weren't spending that much time together anymore. And then you decided to take that vacation with your sister, and all that time I had to spend alone. What did you expect? Does that feel like an apology to you? I didn't think so. Now, for a narcissistic person to genuinely apologize can feel almost impossible. To do so, to apologize, is a sort of psychological recognition that they are human and flawed and not perfect. And that cracks through their grandiosity and evokes all kinds of shame. So they may do the sort of pseudo-apology to get out of trouble, or to look good, or just to be able to say that they apologized. But in fact, the I am sorry is a setup for the defense that's about to come. You can call it a defense or a rationalization, whatever, but ultimately it is meant to say, okay, I did a thing that you didn't like, but you got to see it was understandable. For a narcissistic person, they invoke that self-defense argument all the time. The word sorry tricks us into thinking we just heard an apology, but you didn't really. Dig deeper, write out what they said if you need, and if you will see that nearly every narcissistic apology you have ever received was really them defending themselves and never an accountability. Now this doesn't feel good. Listen, we are human beings. We make mistakes in relationships all the time. That's normal. And relationships can and often do absolutely move forward from these mistakes. That happens, though, when the other person, or whoever the person is, even you, when you did something wrong, you take genuine accountability, you acknowledge the other person's pain, you make amends, and you don't keep doing the thing that required the apology. Relationships not only move forward from that, they can actually grow. The entire enterprise of narcissistic apologies is really all about gaslighting, deflection, and their maintenance of their grandiose and perfect vision of themselves, while continuing to paint you out as the problem who's too sensitive, and then their behavior as being understandable. So when you do finally get that apology, that so-called apology, you often don't feel whole, because ultimately it wasn't an apology. And you'd be surprised, even therapists can get tricked by that. Couples therapists will say, well, look, he just said sorry. But if it had all that gaslighty schmutz underneath it, not so sure it was an apology. Don't let the word trick you. Pay attention to all the other festoonery around that I'm sorry, and make sure it's not just them defending their bad behavior. Today we're going to take on the very interesting issue of what are you supposed to do when a narcissist apologizes. Basically, what do you do with a narcissist's apology? And as always, if you like this video, give us that like, hit that subscribe button, hit that bell, and then join this community. Again, you're going to learn a lot more probably than you actually want. So, what do you do when a narcissist apologizes? Because it can be actually kind of confusing, right? Our narcissistic friends don't really apologize that much. So, when I ask you, what do you do with a narcissist apology? This isn't a riddle, and there isn't a punchline, though I do have a few thoughts about what to do with a narcissist apology that would require obscene language, and I don't want to go there. So let's start simple. Given that they don't like to take responsibility for anything, why do they ever apologize? Because right now, drop it in the comments. How many of you have had a narcissist say, I'm sorry to you? I bet it's a lot of you. It would seem that they wouldn't apologize, right? Especially since they do not take responsibility for their behavior. And by definition, an apology is taking responsibility, right? Not really. An apology done correctly is taking responsibility. Addressing the other person's feelings, striving for reconciliation, and committing to learning from it, that's an apology. Unfortunately, that's not what a narcissistic apology is. A narcissistic apology is a way of sort of keeping the trains running on time, of getting off the hook for something, of getting back to the way they want things to be. It's just a way of like, let's just dust that away so we can keep going. So let's take a look at the anatomy of a narcissistic apology. First of all, you're going to notice in their apology, they do not take responsibility for what they did. So here are some common apology statements that narcissists will give you. They'll say, I'm sorry you feel that way. Or, I'm sorry that you think that. Or they might say, I'm sorry it didn't go the way you want. I am sorry you feel hurt. All are very common narcissistic apologies. And in all of these apologies, what you see is that they are not apologizing for something they did or something they said. They are, in essence, though, using the apology as a way of gaslighting you and invalidating your experience. Hey, I'm sorry you feel that way. Kind of meaning that you probably shouldn't. Now, let's look at the anatomy of a healthy apology. A healthy apology might look something like this. I'm really sorry for what I said. I can see that you're hurt, and I am so sorry that my words hurt you. Or you could try, I'm so sorry for what I did to you. I didn't tell the truth, and that's not okay. I'll strive to do better. A healthy responsibility a healthy apology takes responsibility, acknowledges the feelings of the other person, and commits to change. Responsibility, acknowledgement, and commitment. As you see in the narcissistic apologies, there's almost never any real responsibility taken. Instead, they pathologize the hurt party or the harmed party for their feelings or for taking issue with what the narcissist did. And if you haven't heard it yet, just a reminder, narcissists don't really change. So the other mistake that people can make once a narcissist apologizes to them is that they may now believe, great, they apologized. Well, now they get it. See, they see what they did wrong, so they won't do it again. Not true. Many, many times a narcissist, when they actually do apologize, it can be a byproduct of a fight that you had with them where they were in fact in the wrong. I can't believe you did this and won't say sorry, and then you're really angry at them, okay? Well, it's a bit of a headache for them if you're angry. They may go through their whole narcissistic rage, but once you get angry, you may actually stop giving them supply. So they may apologize to make things go back to how they want things to be. But the idea that their apology means that they understand what they did and that they're going to change their behavior, it isn't true. And if you hold that belief, it's likely that you're going to be very disappointed. When healthy people apologize, they tend to not make the same mistake again and again and again, or do the same bad behavior again. It's not that way with narcissists. They apologize so they can have their lives back the way they want them. They don't care that they hurt someone else, so they just do it again. Now, we see this on a public scale all the time. The celebrity or the tyrannical CEO or the tyrannical politician, they do a bad thing because that's what they do. They do bad things. Now, obviously, they're not writing their own apologies. They have an enabling publicist to do that. And then the sorry, because people love hearing that people they put up on a pedestal are sorry. We come to find out that that sorry was for a behavior, but that was just one of many in a long chain of scandals. We've all seen the press conferences where they offer an anemic, I'm sorry, maybe they even fake a few tears, and it doesn't ring true. But we accept it, which is fine. But then we don't get to be surprised when they do it again. Saying sorry ends up as a get out of jail free card, and everyone accepting those apologies become their enablers. If you grew up in a narcissistic family system, you are used to empty apologies. On the rare day you would get an apology, then in your childlike faith, you would believe they actually get it and wouldn't say something awful again. But that's not what would happen. The family member would apologize, do it again, apologize, do it again. And sadly, if you are in couples therapy and trying to work through a relationship with a narcissist, if your therapist is not wise to narcissism, you may find yourself gaslighted and being told that your narcissist apology in therapy is something that you should accept without question. But as we all know, not everyone has the luxury of leaving a relationship with a narcissist. So what do you do with their pseudo apology, gaslighting messes that they put in front of you? Number one, see it for what it is. An attempt by the narcissist to just keep life moving forward and giving you an apology that is more about invalidation and gaslighting than about genuine contrition. But most importantly, do not see their apology as a commitment to change, because that can set you up for the exhaustion of disappointment, which just isn't worth it. And an apology also doesn't mean that they get it, especially the twisted sorts of apologies that they offer, like, I'm sorry you feel that way. These apologies can actually leave you feeling worse than you did before you ever got the apology. Now, lots of people ask me, do narcissists apologize? That's the question. That's how this video began. And my answer to them is always not really. Just saying the words, I'm sorry, don't qualify as an apology. You need all of the essential ingredients that make up an apology: awareness, responsibility, and a commitment to change. In the absence of these things, it's just narcissistic window dressing. You just need to keep your eyes open. And keep in mind too, when a narcissist does a bad thing, one of the things that gets triggered for them is shame. And when they have that shame reaction, they get mad, but they also get uncomfortable. Their apology is sometimes a way of pushing that shame feeling away, but it's all about them. And it has nothing to do with what an apology should be about, which is reconciliation and the rebuilding of trust. So next time you get a narcissistic apology, recognize what it really is. Definitely don't view it as a call for change, and you decide whether or not you want to accept it or not. Now, have you ever had a narcissist shame you because you didn't take their apology? So they apologized to you, and then you were like, no, I'm not taking your apology. And they're like, oh, you're such a bad person. Drop that in the comments if it's ever happened to you. Before I get to this video, I also just want to remind everyone, if you haven't been listening to it, please, oh please, consider listening to my new podcast, Navigating Narcissism. The information for it, the links are in the video notes, but I'd love for you to listen. It's a very interesting podcast. You get to hear me talk to people who have survived narcissistic abuse in ways you couldn't even imagine. All right, so let's take this on, though. Come on. Some of us, I've had this happen, certainly. Believe it or not, the narcissistic person apologizes, right? Yeah, it happens. It actually happens more often than you'd think. Now, I got to ask you this. What was the apology like? Did it feel sincere? Or was it a pseudo apology like, I'm sorry you feel that way? Or, I didn't intend to hurt you. Oh, really? You didn't intend to? Well, I guess that makes everything okay. And may just mean maybe you're not a sadist because you didn't intend to hurt me, even though you didn't. You did hurt me, right? But file all of this under toxic apologies. When they hurt you, but their apology is that they didn't intend to hurt you, they can just go F themselves. So the narcissistic person might apologize. By the time they get around to it, it happens on their schedule. And their apologies often don't involve them taking accountability. It can, like I said, be, I'm sorry you feel that way. I didn't intend for you to get mad. Or, I only had sex with that other person because you weren't nice to me, but I'm sorry if it made you mad. You're kind of going, where's the apology in that? Their apology often serves to further pathologize us. But I think that just because they got the word sorry into a sentence, they think that it qualifies as a true apology. But just to hear them form the words I and sorry in the same sentence, for folks that are trauma bonded, that can actually be quite shocking and sadly quite welcomed. The narcissistic apology is often quite late, after they've managed their anger and their shame and their narrative that they are right and you are wrong, and they maintain that belief of they're right and you're wrong, even at the time they apologize to you. Maybe their apology is a hoover, a way to suck you back in. Maybe it's a manipulation to get you to do something they want. Maybe they do it so they look good to the world. Maybe they do it because someone else asks them to, or an employer requires it. Like one of those sort of gross politician apologies, but then they turn around and just do the bad things again. But the day comes, whatever their reason, they give you one of these pseudo apologies. And you, I hope, maybe you're getting stronger. And you recognize the BS and the BS of the apology, and I am sorry you feel that way is not working for you as an apology. You don't give a rat's ass about what they intended or didn't intend. You are tired of the toxic carousel, and you say, okay, thanks for this apology thing you're giving me, but I don't think I can accept it. Or I'm not ready to accept it, or I don't forgive you, or I don't care what you intended, or it doesn't feel like an apology, or whatever you feel. But the bottom line is that you do not need to just give them a big hug and tell them how great they are for apologizing, even though everyone around you is going to tell you to do that. And then when you don't take their apology, when they give it, they shame you. for not accepting it. And you'll hear everything from "you're a bad person," "you're unforgiving," "you're mean," "you're cruel." Maybe they'll even call you narcissistic. They'll tell you you're a bad person for not just accepting their apology. And by that, they really mean that you're not seeing them as the morally wonderful person that they are. They'll tell you that only a dark-hearted person wouldn't accept an apology, and no wonder they're so frustrated in this relationship with you because you're so rigid that you won't take their apology. They tend to conveniently forget that they, as a narcissist, are a serial offender, and there is no apology big enough to cover all of the terrible things they've done to you in this relationship. Even the apologizing has to work on their schedule when they want to do it. And then you have to accept it when they offer it, but only when they wanted to give it, even though you really needed it at the time the bad thing happened. So here's some apologizing 101 for you. Apologies should always be about accountability and responsibility. I'm sorry I hurt you. I'm sorry for what I said. I'm sorry for what I did. An apology is always accountable. And a really good apology also checks in. I'm sorry I hurt you, and I'm sorry for what I said. Can I ask, how are you feeling? Ideally, an apology happens in proximity to the incident. The longer you wait, the less sincere it feels. Honestly, a good, accountable apology is never too late, but you got to understand, as the apologizer, for the apologizee, some scar tissue has developed and you don't know how they're going to take it. And here's the other half of Apology 101. No one is obligated to accept your apology, not right away, maybe not even ever. In some cases, people will take your apology right away. But in many cases, they may need a minute. And in some cases, people may not accept it. That's their prerogative. If you did wrong by someone, they do get to take a moment to decide whether this apology works for them. But in the narcissistic person's world, everything is on their schedule. And if you do not do what works for them, or that still leaves them holding the shame bag, they do not like it. And if you do not take their half-baked apology and effusively thank them for it, "Oh gosh, thank you for your apology," well, they don't like that. And they will get mad at you and shame you for it. This is a reminder, though, that you cannot win in these relationships. Like, you need another reminder, right? A narcissistic person does bad things, and they rarely apologize in a timely manner. When they do, it's sort of a false apology. And if you don't accept it, then it turns into a new abuse sequence that you're the bad one. But it can also be challenging to be called unforgiving and cold and mean when that is not who you are. When you have been patient and put up with someone's stuff for a long time and are again being shamed because you don't embrace their apology on their schedule, it can bring up feelings of grief, exhaustion, disgust, and anger. And if you are so trauma bonded that their distorted version of reality holds any truth, their calling you bad for not accepting their half-baked apology may actually, sadly, land for you and leave you feeling worse about yourself. The mantra remains the same in these relationships. You can't win. You really can't win. If you want to drop them in the comments, please share the most awful pseudo apologies you've ever gotten from a narcissistic person. I think it would really be good for all of us to see all of the sort of difficult and nightmarish apology situations we've been left in, where the apology sometimes feels worse than the offense.
But I'm going to take on something that I think a few of you are not going to agree with. So I think the comments on this one may be a little bit robust, but I'm going to go out there because it happened to me recently. And I was like, oh no, people are not still saying this. And I bet every one of you has said this. I know I've made the mistake of saying this. So what is this thing that people are saying and they really shouldn't be doing? Let's all make a commitment to stop saying, I'm sorry you feel that way. Let's file this statement, I'm sorry you feel that way, under a mistake we all make. But saying it runs the risk of pulling us into well-intended but toxic territory. And this sentence is a favorite ploy of the narcissist. It's this absolutely messed up phrase of, I'm sorry you feel that way. Drop it in the comments. How many of you have had that said to you by the narcissist? And fess up. How many of you have said it yourselves? Because every time I hear someone say this, I wince. It's sort of a pseudo empathy covered in a gaslight. It's like chocolate covered rotten fish. It's not okay. So let's break this statement down so you can understand why I have such a problem with it. Because let's face it, we've all said it. This sentence, that sentence should not go on. It should just be, I'm sorry, not you feel that way. I'm sorry. Now, assuming that the person did something to be sorry for. But when you say, I'm sorry you feel that way, you're judging a person's emotion. And that judgment of a person's emotion is a core tactic of gaslighting. I'm sorry you feel that way casts doubt on a person's feelings, as though you are sorry that they are having a particular feeling. And the assumption is that they actually could or even should be having another kind of a feeling. Now, I'm sorry you feel that way is a statement that is typically uttered when the person saying this may have done or said something that has caused discomfort for another person. Things that include lying to them, criticizing them, betraying them, manipulating them, hurting them, something harmful. So someone says something harmful to another person. Then that other person, not surprisingly, has a reaction. They may feel anger, sadness, maybe they even want to end the relationship. They certainly probably feel let down, but they have an emotion. They have an experience, a reaction. And the hurter, the harmer, the person who did the hurting will say, I'm sorry you feel that way. Who exactly are they sorry for? The other person who was hurt or themselves, because the hurt person's feeling isn't working out for them? Then that's not empathy. It's self-pity. So let me put some examples out there to make this clear. And again, if you have some good examples, again, drop those in the comments too, because it's important to understand this. Let's say person A and person B are in a relationship. Person A tells person B something in confidence, a secret, or something that they don't want shared with other people. Person B turns around and tells her mother what person A said. And then person A finds out that person B betrayed their confidence and is incensed and embarrassed. Person A tells and shares her feeling with person B, who shared that secret, and person B says, I'm sorry you feel that way. Now let's another example. Luna and Gus are in a work meeting. Luna keeps interrupting Gus, not letting Gus finish a thought, casting shade on Gus, even gaslighting Gus during the meeting. Gus finally gets an opportunity, his opportunity to speak in the meeting. And when he's done speaking, lets Luna know that her behavior wasn't okay. And that Gus says, I didn't feel heard or valued. Luna then says, I'm sorry you feel that way. So actually what should have happened, person B should have apologized to person A and had enough empathy to understand, reasonably so, that person A was hurt and was having a very real emotional experience because of it. Luna should have known that Luna was cutting Gus off, and instead of taking ownership for that behavior that was pointed out to Luna, pathologized Gus for having an experience in that meeting. I'm sorry you feel that way. So I'm sorry you feel that way is a self-protective statement. And let's face it, that kind of self-protection is very common in narcissism. It's a way to get a person off the hook and move the spotlight onto the emotions of the hurt party rather than the behavior of the transgressor, of the person who did the bad thing. Now, some of you may be thinking, slow down, sister. I have said this to the narcissist. I've said to them, I'm sorry you feel that way. That narcissistic person will be coming at me about how hurt they are, and they're the one who hurt me. And they start calling me the gaslighter, and they start calling me the narcissist when none of that's true. And then I turn around and I said to them, well, I'm sorry you feel that way. But the fact is, everyone, in that statement, in that case, the statement is inaccurate. Are you actually sorry that they feel that way? It's more likely that you are angry they feel that way, or confused that they feel that way, or puzzled that they feel that way. It seems that the more appropriate response would be, I don't agree with you on that. Or you might try, you're telling me that you're hurt? I hear that. It appears that now we're both hurt. That would be a reasonable response. Or you might say, I'm actually confused about why you think I'm a narcissist, but I wouldn't recommend that as a stance, because that's basically falling into the vat of explaining and defending and engaging, which we know is a no-no. But you're not sorry they feel that way. You're pissed that they feel that way. Language matters. This statement of I'm sorry you feel that way is far more often used against people than it is ever used against the narcissistic folks. But no matter who you are, it's simply bad relationship hygiene. When you say you are sorry that someone feels a certain way, it's passive aggressive and you are judging their emotion. It falls into other toxic things that people may say, like, well, I don't agree with your emotion right now. What the actual F? I actually recently had a narcissistic person do this to me. And I looked at him and when he said that, and I said, come again, like, you don't agree with my emotion? Like, this is not multiple choice. There's no right answer here, because that is what I am sorry you feel that way is. I do know that some people try to use this statement as a sort of a clarifier. In essence, they didn't mean for their statement or their behavior to be hurtful, but the other person does get hurt. And the person who said the statement is saying, I'm sorry you feel that way, is trying to clarify their intention. But still, it's still the wrong statement. Always start with real empathy. Try and said, I'm sorry I hurt you. Even if it wasn't your intention, they're hurt. Sometimes we take on the language of the toxic. It happens. Some of these phrases, like, I'm sorry you feel that way, bubble into the landscape in a way that we start taking them on. And especially when we feel guilt about the hurt or harm we may have caused, and then we're trying to protect ourselves, right? This statement, I'm sorry you feel that way, is a way to do that. It feels like empathy, but it's really not. It's a way to sound empathic, but in fact, it leaves the other person feeling crazy. And that, my friends, is gaslighting. So that's why we don't want to do this. And if it's done to you, now you know what's being done to you. And if you didn't like this video, well, I'm sorry you feel that way. No, I'm just kidding. If you didn't like this video, then I'm actually just plain sorry. It's a bad statement. And ironically, I've had it probably once a month for the last 3 months. Different people have said, I'm sorry you feel that way. And I remember it sort of hit me here. And I know it's happened with clients and other people I know. And I was like, what is this? And then I recognized it was sort of this passive aggressive kind of, it definitely threw me off balance. And I thought, something throws me off balance, especially in what should be a connected conversation. Pay attention to that. So let's not do that anymore. Okay. Thanks again. Bye-bye.